Be sure to hop on over to the Spiritual Broadcast Network. It's the go-to place for all things spiritual. You'll discover internet television shows that you won't find anywhere else. You can also choose from hundreds of hours of spiritual documentaries and movies. You'll enjoy on-demand and live internet television programming 24/7. Best of all, we add new dramas, comedies, talk, and reality shows and more on a daily basis. So why spend countless hours searching the web when you can quickly find just what you want on the Spiritual Broadcast Network?
Wisdom Through Action is a contemporary sea-influenced school teaching the work of personal inner development in the system brought to the Western world by G.I. Gurdjieff and P.D. Ouspensky. Mr. Ouspensky said, "The most important ideas and principles of this system do not belong to me. This is chiefly what makes them valuable, because if they belonged to me, they would be like all other theories invented by ordinary minds." What he meant was that this system comes from higher mind, from conscious influence. It is an objective system to bring a man to awakening.
Welcome to Wisdom Through Action. I'm your host, Kay Smith. I'd like to begin today's show with a passage from J.H. Reiner's book, Gurdjieff in Action. The now familiar ideas of the Russian mystic George Ivanovich Gurdjieff have particular significance today, for there can be no doubt that the world has entered the age of barbarism, foretold in legend, and conventional remedies are clearly inadequate. It was, in fact, a deep mistrust of orthodox doctrines which prompted the youthful Gurdjieff to forsake his home at the age of 15 and embark on a long and arduous quest for sources of ancient wisdom, which could reveal the real purpose of life on earth. The journey was to last for 20 years, until finally he found what he sought in a Sufi monastery in the Hindu Kush. He realized that the evils of the present age arise from the fact that humanity is spiritually asleep, an idea expressed by Christ nearly 2,000 years ago, but hardly ever understood. And he devoted the rest of his life to the attempt to arouse a proper awareness of man's place and purpose. His teaching was no new religion promising some future and automatic salvation. On the contrary, it required a sustained individual effort to become more conscious of one's behavior in the midst of the daily activities of present life, so that it is sometimes called the fourth way, as distinct from the ways of the fakir, monk, or yogi, which require a withdrawal from life. Originally, the ideas were communicated personally and secretly, but after Gurdjieff's death in 1949, a number of books began to appear, notably P.D. Ouspensky's In Search of the Miraculous, which is recognized as the definitive exposition of the teaching, and an extensive series of psychological commentaries by Maurice Nicole. In addition, there was released an allegorical tale of man's situation entitled All and Everything, which had been written by Gurdjieff himself as a cosmological background to the ideas. The real value of the teaching, however, lies in its application, by which one can learn how to make conscious use of the experiences of life. If this can be achieved, it begins to inspire one's whole existence with a kind of impersonal delight. But even more significantly, it contributes to the pool of cosmic consciousness, and thereby helps to offset the forces of evil which are evoked by the greed and selfishness of sleeping humanity. This is an unfamiliar idea, but one finds many references to the positive and apparently disproportionate influence of individual awakening. In particular, there is a legend attributed to Gautama Buddha concerning a bodhisattva, enlightened being, called the regarder of the cries of the world. Suppose, says the legend, thousands of people, going about their normal occupations, are suddenly assailed by storms and malevolent demons. If just one of them remembers the name of this enlightened being, then all the people will be delivered from peril. There is an urgent need at the present time to remember one's real purpose. Influences from more conscious levels of the universe are continually playing upon the earth, but we are too concerned with our personal desires to hear them. The inspiration of Gurdjieff's teaching lies not in its detailed formulations, but in its power to stimulate the development of individual consciousness. For good or for ill, life and nature are governed by laws that we can't change. The quicker we accept this, the more tranquil we can be. We would be foolish to wish that our children or our spouse would live forever. They are mortal, just as we are, and the law of mortality is completely out of our hands. Similarly, it is foolish to wish that an employee, a relative, or friend be without fault. This is wishing to control things that can't truly be controlled. With this work, we learn to control our reactions and feelings about things, and not be disappointed and controlled by our desires. We develop the ability to deal with events according to facts, and understand the laws that we live under, rather than being swept away by them. In order to learn the control that I'm speaking about, we must understand, on a practical level, the laws that we live under. With the following 30-minute video, you will begin to understand one of these laws, the law of three, and its implications.
The law of three is one of the two basic laws in the universe, which govern all processes both in the world and in man. The study of man must go side by side with the study of the universe. We will begin with the study of the universe, and in particular, the origin of the law of three, the absolute. Philosophically, a man can suppose an absolute, the ultimate, God. Such an absolute would include all possible dimensions both of time and space. That is to say, it would include not only the whole universe, which man can perceive or imagine, but all such universes which may lie beyond the power of perception. It would include not only the present moment of all such universes, but also their past and future, whatever past and future may mean on their scale. It would include not only everything actualized in all the past, present, and futures of all universes, but also everything that potentially could be actualized in them. Such a conception is philosophical for us. Logically, it must be like that, but our mind is unable to come to grips with the formula or make any sense of it. In order to think about the absolute, we have to think of it in the form of some body, quality, or law. So we will begin with the law of three in one, or Trinity. The law of three says, the effect or influence of any body upon another body varies in three ways. The larger body lights and warms the smaller body in inverse proportion to the square of its distance. At twice the distance, only a quarter of the amount of influence is felt. This is its radiance. The larger body interacts gravitationally with the smaller body in direct proportion to its mass, and the larger affects the smaller after a delay in direct proportion to its distance. This is time. These constitute the effect of the first three modifications of unity, the first three modifications of the Absolute. The first fundamental law of the universe is the law of three forces, or three principles, or the law of three. According to many ancient systems of philosophy, all phenomena that exist, from the gods downward, arise from the interaction of three forces. One is described as an active or creative nature, the second as passive or material, and the third as mediating or formative. In Christian philosophy, these three forces are expressed by the three persons of the Trinity, the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, which create the universe. In medieval alchemy, all things were seen as varying mixtures of the three, salt, sulfur, and mercury. In Indian Sankhya, a similar role was assigned to the three gunas, rajas, tamas, and sattva. In Hinduism, the forces were again personified as Shiva, Parvati, and Vishnu. And in China, they acquired a metaphysical cast in the interplay of yin and yang, overseen by the Tao. In all these systems, the nature of the three forces was universal. They were regarded as entering into everything, everywhere, and on every scale, from the world of maggots to that of the stars, from the effect of light to that of thought or aspiration. And yet, for the most part, the law of three forces is unknown. The teaching of the three forces goes mostly unrecognized due to the functional limitations of man's ordinary psychology. People are simply not able to perceive and observe the third force directly. Again, we must examine the fundamental law of three that creates all phenomena in all the diversity or unity of all universes. It consists of the fact that every phenomenon, on whatever scale, in whatever world it may take place, from molecular to cosmic phenomena, is the result of the combination or the meeting of three different and opposing forces. Contemporary thought realizes the existence of two forces and the necessity of these two forces for the production of a phenomenon, force and resistance, positive and negative magnetism, positive and negative electricity, male and female cells, and so on. But it does not observe even these two forces always and everywhere. And no question has ever been raised as to the third, or if it has been raised, it has scarcely been heard. According to real, exact knowledge, one force or two forces can never produce a phenomenon. The presence of a third force is necessary, for it is only with the help of a third force that the first two can produce what may be called a phenomenon, no matter in what sphere. The first force may be called active or positive, the second passive or negative, the third neutralizing. But these are merely names, for in reality all three forces are equally active and appear as active, passive, and neutralizing only at their meeting points, that is to say, only in relation to one another at a given moment. The first two forces are more or less comprehensible to man, and the third may sometimes be discovered either at the point of application of the forces or in the medium or in the result. But, speaking in general, the third force is not easily accessible to direct observation and understanding. The reason for this is to be found in the functional limitations of man's ordinary psychological activity and in the fundamental categories of our perception of the phenomenal world, that is, in our sensation of space and time resulting from these limitations. People cannot perceive and observe the third force directly any more than they can spatially perceive the fourth dimension. But by studying himself, the manifestations of his thought, consciousness, activity, his habits, his desires, and so on, man may learn to observe and see in himself the action of the three forces. Let us suppose, for instance, that a man wants to work on himself in order to change certain of his characteristics to attain a higher level of being. His desire, his initiative, is the active force. The inertia of all his habitual psychological life, which shows opposition to his initiative, will be the passive or the negative force. The two forces will either counterbalance one another, or one will completely conquer the other, but at the same time it will become too weak for any further action. Thus, the two forces will, as it were, revolve one around the other, one absorbing the other and producing no result whatever. This may continue for a lifetime. A man may feel desire and initiative, but all this initiative may be absorbed in overcoming the habitual inertia of life, leaving nothing for the purpose toward which the initiative ought to be directed. It may go on until the third force makes its appearance, in the form, for instance, of new knowledge, showing at once the advantage or the necessity of work on oneself, and, in this way, supporting and strengthening the initiative. Then the initiative, with the support of this third force, may conquer inertia and the man becomes active in the desired direction. Examples of the action of the three forces and the moments of entry of the third force may be discovered in all manifestations of our psychic life, in all phenomena of the life of human communities and of humanity as a whole, and in all the phenomena of nature around us. But at the beginning, it is enough to understand the general principle. Every phenomenon, of whatever magnitude it may be, is inevitably the manifestation of three forces. One or two forces cannot produce a phenomenon, and if we observe a stoppage in anything, or an endless hesitation at the same place, we can say that, at the given place, the third force is lacking. In trying to understand this, it must be remembered at the same time that people cannot observe phenomena as manifestations of three forces because we cannot observe the objective world in our subjective states of consciousness. And in the subjectively observed phenomenal world, we see in phenomena only the manifestation of one or two forces. If we could see the manifestation of three forces in every action, we should then see the world as it is, things in themselves. Only it must here be remembered that a phenomenon which appears to be simple may actually be very complicated. That is, it may be a very complex combination of trinities. But we know that we cannot observe the world as it is, and this should help us to understand why we cannot see the third force. The third force is a property of the real world. The subjective or phenomenal world of our observation is only relatively real. At any rate, it is not complete. We must now try to understand how to begin to study it. In this study we must go very slow, using principles given. The first point in understanding the meaning of triads is to remember that all manifestations of energy, any kind of action in the world, in man's activity, inside the human machine, or in external events, always consists of triads. We spoke of 6 different triads comprehensible to the human mind, each representing a different combination of forces. In order not to make it too complicated in the beginning, we will consider only human activity. But here we come to a difficulty. We have never thought of activity itself being different. We do not understand that one action can be as different from another as two different objects. We know the difference between wood and metal, and we will not mix them. To us, actions are the same. Only one starts with one aim and has one result, and another starts with another aim and has a different result. We think only about motives, aims, and results, and not about the actions themselves. A man may have one aim, but takes an action that cannot even by accident give him what he wants. It is necessary to coordinate aim with action. Otherwise, you will never attain what you want. All the absurdities of life depend on the fact that people do not understand that certain things can be done with only one kind of triad. They use the wrong triad, a wrong action, and are surprised that the results are not what they wanted. For instance, it is no good trying to teach by beating, or trying to persuade with machine guns. The results are not what is wanted. This is what we must understand in relation to our actions, and we must try to find different categories of actions. 6 categories of action, 3 descending and 3 ascending. It is necessary to use the right triad or action to obtain the desired result. The 6 cosmic processes are quite different in their nature. Take 2 simple examples in order to understand the idea. To build a house, effort is needed at every moment. Every single brick must be put into place with a certain effort. No triad passes into another triad without effort. At last the house is built and furnished. Then, if you want to burn it, you just strike a match and put it to something flammable and the house is burnt. If you go deeper into it, you will see that these are 2 different activities. You cannot build a house by the same activity as you burn it. In the second case, one triad passes into another without any effort, automatically, after the first initial effort of striking a match. Another triad may be called invention, discovery, craft. What is the distinction between building a house and craft? In the case of building a house, simple blind effort is needed, and in invention, something more is required, some knowledge or capacity for invention. The triad of growth can be seen in nature. A plant grows, an animal grows, a man grows. This process happens by itself. Now, we can see this in the life of a man. In the psychic life of man, growth can be seen as eternal compromise, adjustment of ambition to circumstance, coming to rest at the halfway solution. Example: a youth feels an aspiration to become a great painter. This activating desire plunges into the resistance of life, poverty, lack of opportunity, responsibility for family, etc. By the time he is 40, he is a commercial artist designing advertising layouts. The triad of crime, decay, disease, corruption. Crime is a process that, once started, continues on by itself. An unhealthy element is contagious. One rotten apple spoils the barrel and tends to bring the whole body down. Negativity. Examples of the triad of regeneration, in our experience, can be found only in conscious work, not identified work, or in some activity that has a peculiar quality of its own that cannot be imitated by others, such as artistic creation. Efforts at self-remembering and not identifying belong to this category. If you think about it, you will understand that in order to paint a good picture, for instance, one must use a different triad from the one used in building a house, or the one used for burning a house. Something else is needed in the triad of regeneration. Why do we put self-remembering with art? Because they both require an emotional intention first, that is, a picture or feeling of the end result without it being a fixed picture. The artist must hold divided attention intensely while painting the picture. He experiences the impression and captures it. Form organizing matter in imitation of the life principle. Creating a play consciously with an appropriate aim might become such a process of regeneration. These universal laws are really beyond our mind, so with all the wish to study them you will not understand much more than words, but even this is useful. With the help of these words you reconstruct your views of the universe and put man in the right place in relation to different worlds. A man decides to raise himself to a higher level of consciousness. His active will, desire, and effort are pitted against the passive inertia of his physical machine with all its inborn tendencies and acquired habits. These two forces struggle together without result until he can attract the intervention of a third or deciding force, the aid of an esoteric school and school knowledge. This aid and this knowledge are quite literally invisible. Third force is unchanging, invisible, and unrecognized, and it can neither be commanded nor manipulated by the other two forces. Its role will be mysterious. Thus, to achieve what he wishes, he must learn to take third force into account. He must learn to consider the invisible. Change in the quality of neutralizing force will not only alter the relation of forces in a triad, but may reverse the active and passive forces. When life is neutralizing force, personality is active in a man, and essence is passive. When the work is neutralizing force, the position is reversed, namely, essence, or the real part, becomes active, and personality, or the acquired part, passive. In the work you can see two forces, the ideas of the system and your own resistance, your own sleep. In each particular case, a certain third force enters and either helps one side or another side. In psychology, many things can be explained by the necessity of the third force. This also explains why we cannot bring the third force. And without the third force, no action can happen, or it happens in a different way from the way we meant it to happen. The three forces are in yourself and outside yourself, on our scale, on planetary scale, on universal scale, on all scales. The brain, predetermined by great nature for the concentration and further actualization of the first holy force of the law of three, called the holy affirming, is localized and found in the head, the intellectual function. The second brain, which transforms and crystallizes the second holy force of the law of three, namely the holy denying, is placed in us along the whole of our back, in the spinal column, the instinctive and moving functions. The third brain, which transforms the third holy force of the law of three, namely the holy reconciling force, is in the region of the breast, and the totality of the nerve nodes in the breast. This is called the solar plexus, the emotional function. The triad of regeneration, 3, 2, 1. The triad we are concerned with is the triad of conscious regeneration. The Gurdjieff to Hartman musical composition, wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, may be composed to reveal the law of three. Wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, wholly affirming, affirming. Wholly affirming, denying. Wholly affirming, reconciling. Wholly denying, affirming. Wholly denying, denying. Wholly denying, reconciling. Wholly reconciling, affirming. Wholly reconciling, denying. Wholly reconciling, reconciling.
When considering the future, remember that all situations unfold as they do, regardless of how we feel about them. Our hopes and fears sway us, not events themselves. Undisciplined people driven by their personal antipathies and sympathies are forever on the lookout for signs that build up or reinforce their unexamined views and opinions. Events themselves are impersonal, though judicious people certainly can and should respond to them in beneficial ways. Instead of personalizing an event, this is my triumph, this is my blunder, or this is my bitter misfortune, and drawing withering conclusions about yourself or human nature, watch for how you can put certain aspects of the event to good use. Is there some less than obvious benefit embedded in the event that a trained eye might discern? Pay attention, be a sleuth. Perhaps there is a lesson you can extract and apply to similar events in the future. In any events, however seemingly dire, there is nothing to prevent us from searching for the hidden opportunity. It is a failure of the imagination not to do so. But to seek out the opportunity in situations requires a great deal of courage. For most people around you will persist on interpreting events in the grossest terms, success or failure, good or bad, right or wrong. These simplistic, polarized categories obscure more creative and useful interpretations of events that are far more advantageous and interesting. The wise person knows it is fruitless to project hopes and fears on the future. This only leads to forming melodramatic representations in your mind and wasting time. At the same time, one shouldn't passively acquiesce to the future and what it holds. Simply doing nothing does not avoid risk, but heightens it. There is a place for prudent planning and for making provisions for situations to come. Proper preparation for the future consists of forming good personal habits. This is done by actively pursuing the good in all the particulars of your daily life, and by regularly examining your motives to make sure they are free from the shackles of fear, greed, and laziness. If you do this, you won't be buffeted about by outside events. Train your intentions rather than fooling yourself into thinking that you can manipulate events. If you are helped by praying or meditating, by all means do so. But seek divine counsel when the application of your own reason hasn't yielded any answers, when you have exhausted other means. What is a good event? What is a bad event? There is no such thing. What is a good person? The one who achieves tranquility by having formed the habit of asking on every occasion, what is the right thing to do now? Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time here on Wisdom Through Action.